Chapter 4. What kind of A to Z would get you here? Art? Asked Warrender, his little front teeth sticking out over his lip in concentration. Yes, art! Stokes waved the gun airily, causing everybody in the party to jump aside. It's my belief that this gun turns ordinary things into infinitely manipulable objects. The vase wasn't destroyed. It was turned into the picture on the screen, then into the line and the dot. It became, if you will, art. But Singh opened his mouth, then closed it again. No, wait. Yes! Farouk snapped his fingers. The gun takes the object from our universe and reactualizes it a few dimensions up. Eh? Shouted Wagstaff. In a world of its own, explained Lucinda. You should know, dear. Such an object could be manipulated across all of time-space. Singh was now warming to this theory. This effect, let us call it the Singh-Farouk effect. The Farouk-Singh effect. The Singh effect. The Farouk effect. What about the Stokes effect? Asked Stokes plaintively. I discovered it. The two scientists turned to look at him for a moment. But you didn't understand it, said Singh. This effect, whatever it is to be called, could revolutionize space travel, power generation, the whole of our culture. Taking a deep breath, he turned to the others. Professors, we must take this secret back to human space. It is our duty to survive whatever hazards this planet may offer. Not too hard, Epstein shrugged. We were planning to do that anyhow. You cannot offer a hazard, said Hetty. Hazards are not offered. Singh pinched the top of his nose in frustration. I said, for that you die, human scum. The little man brandished his sword again. Bernice rubbed the sleep out of her eyes, wondering why she'd ever adopted a lifestyle in which she had to deal with death threats at this time of the morning. I'll be with you in a moment. Wait a sec. She blinked as her eyes adjusted to the low light of dawn. Okay. Right. Human scum, death, and all that. Hello. Before the little man could say anything more, a great roar caused all 7 of the small people to jump in surprise. Something large and fluffy bounced across the beds and landed right on top of their representative with the sword. What was that about human scum? Woolsey purred, running a single claw along the underside of the little man's chin, leaving a smooth-shaved furrow behind it. Oh, Moody's always like that. You shouldn't take any notice. The new speaker was a small woman in a rose-tinted shirt and tie-dyed trousers. Underneath, he's absolutely the loveliest small person in the world. I'm not a small person, the boy in the clutches of the cat spat back at her. I'm a dwarf, and I'm proud. Yeah, dwarf pride. Another female dwarf raised a fist in salute. She wore long coloured braids in her hair, and had on a jerkin, with I can't even think big written on it. Bernice looked between them all in shock. Arex, Rose, Marjorie, what are you all doing in my afterlife? She's crackers, declared a female dwarf in an elegant dark cape, 1 sequin short of a ball gown. Oh, hush, bitchy, said the dwarf that looked like Rose. I'm sure she's just confused after waking up. She looks really sweet to me. All tousled and a bit heroic, and with a really fantastic hairdo. Gosh. She blushed and looked at her pixie boots. I'm Gushy. Hi. She... Woolsey plucked Moody off his feet and threw him onto the nearest bed offhandedly. What's all this she business? Are you optically as well as vertically disadvantaged? He pointed at Bernice in puzzlement. This is Dick. That's not a very nice way of putting it, whispered Gushy. Besides, I'm sure it's not true. Looks like a girl to me, muttered a tired-looking dwarf as he stamped off towards his bed. "As long as she doesn't snore, that's fine by me." "That's lazy," Gushy told Bernice. "That's liberal." "Hi." That was the girl with the slogan jerkin. "And that's laddish." "Smart." That was from a fresh-faced boy dwarf with a fringe over his eyes. Bernice stood up slowly and looked down at the dwarves. "But I know you all by other names," she told them. "You're my tutorial group." "Goodness, if this is the afterlife, then you must have done something terrible and karmic involving short people." "As I said," murmured Bitchy, "she's lost in the enchanted forest and can't find her way to the candy cottage." "Perhaps—" Bernice walked slowly around the little people, forming an idea with her hands in the air. "Perhaps you represent the 7 deadly sins. Perhaps this is actually hell." "Hell is little people," said Wolsey. "But you're mistaken anyhow, because there are only 6 of these fellows." "So why did I think—" "No, there are 7 of us," Gushy piped up. "The other one is getting you a cup of hot milk, to wake you gently," he said. When he saw you, he could only say— The door to the bedroom creaked open, and in walked a short boy, gingerly carrying a cup. He looked like he was wearing a long nightshirt that trailed along the ground behind him. He beamed at the sight of Bernice. "She's beautiful," he gasped. Bernice opened her mouth as far as it could go. "Doran?" she gulped. "Well, maybe that's what you know him as," said Gushy. "But we call him cute." The professors were trying to get some sleep. It had been a long night already, and many of the older academics were showing signs of serious fatigue. At Stokes's insistence, they had piled everything they could find in the circular room up against the doors. The academics had mostly complained that this was unnecessary since 1, however ferocious the Grell might be, they were hardly Earth troops. 2, they didn't know the academics were in the city. And 3, they might not even care about their presence. Only Epstein had been as insistent as Stokes. He said that what the Grell prized most was raw data, and, in the form of the gun, they were currently sitting on possibly the richest pickings on the planet. That had started Sing-Off on the business of duty to the human race again, not to mention getting Hetty all grumpy about sitting on pickings, but at least it had motivated everybody towards helping. While they were distracted and moving furniture, Stokes had quietly put the gun in his pocket. He didn't like carrying guns, but he liked other people carrying them even less. Besides, as he'd said, it was no more a weapon than a palette knife was. It really ought to be claimed first and foremost as a means of self-expression. After that, it could build a human empire and power the known planets. He had lain down, finally, his beret under his head, along a green step, and, after much worried shifting of posture, he'd even managed to get to sleep. He dreamt of the green vase. It was twisting in his mind now, along the corridors of the university, and Bernice was saying something about, "Oh, no, it wasn't," and he was insisting that, yes, actually, it was. This continued for some time. From the informative record of recent Grell history. Note: almost uniquely for a sentient species, the Grell do not dream. Dreaming is a method, at its most mechanistic level, of sorting things into boxes, a part of the brain working through all the new information gathered in the day and typing it into deeper memory. Sometimes we achieve a sort of consciousness in the middle of that process and see it all passing by, and make up stories with the stuff. Those stories are what humans call dreams. Like all stories, made up of bits flung onto the floor, as in a poetic experiment, for instance, or a history as revealed through archaeology, dreams somehow bring to the surface deep old archetypal images. A chance striking of 2 surreal statements that illuminates something profound. Caligula as icon rather than person. That time Audrey Hepburn wanted your bus fare, but you hadn't got any change left. The Grell miss out on all that. They have evolved with another brain behind the one that does their thinking, a brain whose task is to sort out every new piece of information as the individual Grell goes along. The Grell do not have to dream. Therefore, the Grell do not have to sleep. Therefore, the Grell roared their way to the top of the evolutionary ladder on Grellor and are now damn near unbeatable in sustained warfare. Some humans think that the Grell are jealous of dreams, and that their feverish desire for new information is a sign of that pathology at the heart of their culture. But that view is often forgotten by history, because history, as well as being written like a dream is written, is also written by the winning side. The Grell Master on the surface of Perfecton had settled the dispute with his servitor, and through the clever technique of touching every bit of the golden doors, had made them open. The maze of tunnels beyond took the Grell several hours to explore. The first light source they came to had been greeted with much hooting and gurgling, and the taking apart and understanding of its design was a little party for the Grell, a moment of levity. It was like that every step the glorious troopers took. Some new design or device took their fancy. They were in paradise indeed. It was thus near dawn when they reached the door to a new chamber. New fact. This door has been weighed shut with heavy objects, reported a servitor. Conjecture. The beings we observed when landed have hidden here. Good fact, the Grell Master decided. Your facts have improved since your wasted thoughts about the first door. The servitor's face tentacles wiggled in delight. Am I to examine this door for other methods of entrance? The Grell Master thought for a moment. Note. Perhaps, with the access he had to data concerning all the races of the universe, this Grell Master was aware, somewhere in his back brain, that the people behind the door would be asleep and dreaming. No, he said. Break it down. Extract ends. Professor Warrender woke Stokes by grabbing him by the lapels and pulling him to a kneeling position. Thus, the first thing that Stokes saw on waking was a hairy, wet nose in front of his eyes. They're coming, shouted Warrender. Stokes leapt straight upright. Wake up, he shouted, and started running about. After a moment, he turned this into a concerted effort to make sure everybody was awake. Singh, on the other side of the room, was already on his feet. Now, how could Warrender possibly know that they're coming? He said, hurriedly starting to pack away his provisions. Wagstaff pointed to shadows moving behind one of the luminescent doors. One had something raised over its head. Look, he shouted. We're doomed. The Grell Datax smashed through the fragile green material, and the door started bulging inward as the Grell outside heaved against it. The academics screamed, yelled, got to their feet, and ran for several of the other doors at once. No, cried Stokes, gaining his balance. Wait! He slapped Warrender's shoulders, gazing into the eyes of the large rodent. Professor, where should we go? Concentrate. The Puckar closed his eyes and curled up his nose. I think, oh dear, it's all rather awful, but that one. He pointed to one of the doors, but no time for buts. Stokes waved his arms violently and indicated the door that Warrender had chosen. The professors who were on their feet ran towards it, and it opened as obligingly as the one on the way in had done. Stokes helped Hetty, Lucinda, and the two elderly history professors get to their feet and start shuffling towards it, and then ran to where Epstein and Farouk were weighing decorative items in their hands and looking grim. Come on, he cried. We are going to have to fight them sometime, Epstein replied. They'll be through that door before the older ones are out the other side. We have to buy them time. Another axe blow split the door. One more would probably do it. Stokes looked between the exit, which the more elderly academics were being led through by Warrender, and his two comrades, wringing the air with his hands in panic. Then he felt the weight in his breast pocket, and remembered the gun. He put a hand on it, and the panic turned to a cold and heavy fear in his chest, because he now knew just what he was about to do, and it scared him witless. You two go on, he said, plucking his words straight out of a holodrama he'd seen. I'll hold them off. He produced the gun. There was another crash from the door. Farouk and Epstein didn't argue, which was a bit of a surprise, but sprinted for the far door. Stokes settled down behind a low green wall and bit his bottom lip. If it wasn't mistaken, without actually thinking about it very much, he'd just made a heroic sacrifice. He had no idea what thought had driven him to do this. Perhaps it was something to do with not recognizing that missile for what it was. Maybe he could have saved the ship. One door splintered into pieces, just as the last academic vanished through the other. The Grell, now visible on the other side, and goodness, looking at them Stokes wished they weren't, started to shove at the remaining objects stacked in front of it. So that business of needing to give the retreating professors covering fire wasn't absolutely correct then. They could have all got out, and Stokes wouldn't have found himself sitting behind a wall, about to die for no very good reason. Sod! This was just such a ridiculous way for an artist to die. Drowning in a big shirt, yes. Taking one's own life as a result of how horrid and arty one's life was, yes, though that one had never appealed to Stokes. Dying in the corner of a gallery opening at an advanced age, yes, absolutely. But being shot to bits, and in such a situation that nobody was probably ever going to know of one's heroism? This was just not a situation that Men Love Stokes had ever conceived of as happening to him. The last object rolled away, and the Grell marched into the room, spinning their axes, making cooing sounds and flexing their face tentacles. Stokes peeped up over the parapet. Perhaps he could negotiate with them. "Human!" shouted one of them, pointing at Stokes's head. "Immobilize him!" ordered the Grell master. A dozen axes swung up to firing position. Stokes threw himself to the ground as the wall in front of him thundered with energy blasts. Remarkably, it stayed absolutely intact. As bolts of blue neon streaked over his head, Stokes decided that dying like this was, actually, too shameful to contemplate. Though it went against all his principles, including the one about staying alive as long as possible, he was going to fire back. He hopped into a crouch, poked the top of the gun over the parapet and, without actually showing enough of himself to aim at anything, squeezed the trigger. From the informative record of recent Grell history. One of the Grell vanished in a puff of fire. "Vital new fact, the human is armed," shouted the Grell master. "Take cover." The Grell ran to various positions about the room, already checking through their huge storehouse of tactical information concerning gunfights in enclosed areas. When they looked up from their carefully and swiftly chosen locations, they discovered that their quarry, who obviously knew nothing of such tactics, had bolted straight for the exit. "Fire!" screamed the Grell master. Extract ends. Stokes had a terrible, mortal feeling in his stomach as he ran for the door, clutching the gun to his chest. Half of it was that he'd shot someone. He didn't like that. He didn't like being full enough of fear and anger to be able to do it. It gave him a fatal sense of deserving the energy bolt in the back that he knew he was about to get. He was a soldier now, and soldiers were killed. The other half of it was simple, rabbit-like logic. He could see now that there was a long corridor on the other side of the door, that he had bought time for the others after all, because the Grell were going to have a clear aim at him all along that tunnel. If he had been a rabbit, he would have accepted that immediately and stood still to be shot. But because he was a human being, he ran anyway. He just got over the threshold of the door when something far too solid and sudden knocked his feet away from him. And then he fell into darkness. Bernice was doing a quick head count of her hosts, who were now sitting around their kitchen table, each at a chair with their name on the back. Lazy, moody, laddish, gushy, bitchy, liberal, and cute. 7 of you. And I knew that before I was told it. How is that possible? Woolsey shrugged a languid cat shrug. He and Bernice had been given mugs of warmer mead and seats with guest carved on the back. I have ceased to understand much of what you say. What worries me, Dick, is that these 7 tadpoles are convinced you're female. Perhaps they've escaped from some travelling show. I hear the king has a new plan to deal with such as they. It is called care in the entertainment community. We have not escaped from a show, exclaimed Moody. We work in our mine and sell the rubies and diamonds that we find there in the village market. Bernice frowned. Is there much of a market for precious stones in a small agrarian community? The dwarves all looked at her blankly. Perhaps they're a little short, suggested Wolsey. Oh, for goodness sake, Bernice slapped the table. Look, once and for all, where am I? What is this place? The land of good King Rupert, said Gushy. Who? Wolsey laughed. Gadzooks, these squibs have never heard of England. Is that possible? Why? I thought there would always be an— Don't sing, Bernice told him sharply. She rubbed her brow. You lot can't even agree on what country we're in. I have memories of being an entirely different person to who you think I am now, and— Was she just as lovely? Asked Cute, in a small, plaintive voice. Bernice ignored him. She was deeply disturbed by these dwarves. They seemed to be characterizations of her best students, quick sketches of their most basic traits, rather than the whole, albeit young, personalities that she knew. In Cute's case, he was just pretty and gawped at her. That said something about her, surely, that, before all this weird business had happened, she'd been about to bonk the littlest dwarf. She sighed. I remember all of you as different people. And worst of all, I remember the person that I was. She struggled with the word. Dying. I believe that I remember the moment of my death. So this has to be an afterlife of some sort. But if it is, where's the judgment or reward or even punishment? What's the point to all this? She stood up, looking around the faces at the table, suddenly angry at how incomprehensible this all was. After a moment with no answers, she threw her hands up and headed for the door. After Bernice had gone, Cute looked at Wolsey and sighed. She's so complicated and deep. Yes, murmured the cat. He is. Extract from the diary of Bernice Summerfield. I stepped out of the cottage feeling sorry for myself. The afterlife seemed so pointless. I've always been the hero of my own story, the one that does things, the one that things happen to. Now I envisaged an eternity, and I mean an eternity, in this fantasy world, watching odd and mildly pleasant things happening. I doubted that it was ever even going to rain. The fact that Wolsey and the dwarves regarded me as 2 entirely different people, even down to my gender, disturbed me too. It added up with the way I'd felt compelled to clean the cottage, the way that I knew certain details of things before they happened. If I had been stored by the great celestial oneness of the universe, my mind preserved forever in this sublime fantasy, then the great celestial oneness had buggered up the process and stored me wrongly, scratched the disc that was me as she dropped me into my box. A forever of wrongness, then, and always of knowing that one was askew, an outsider, the only one in this world with the curse of remembering what I'd been before. Why, this was the end of my marriage all over again. Why, this was actually hell. That thought scared me so much that I went and leant on one of the perfect oak trees and looked up at the perfect yellow sun in the perfect blue sky and thought that I was about to throw up. So I tried, hoping to disturb the very green grass with violent, ordinary human colours, hoping to make a sound that wasn't sweet. I couldn't do it. I hadn't been to the toilet since I got here, because I didn't want to. The cottage didn't even have a toilet. Would my hair grow? Would I get older? Would I be infertile now, because I couldn't imagine the blood of childbirth on this perfect grass? I sat down and hugged my knees, wishing to wake up in my own bed, wishing for Jason to hold me, wishing that at least I could find some trousers. I was, if truth be told, on the fringes of beginning to consider going a little bit gaga. So it's a good thing that what happened next did. From the woods there came the sound of a man crying for help. I rose to my feet, quite pleased, in a guilty sort of way, that something not so nice was happening, and wondering if whatever deity controlled this place had listened to my wishes. From the bushes burst one of the strangest figures I had ever seen. Dear old Professor Candy, in a dress and very bad makeup, running out of the forest as fast as he could go. He seemed to have taped 2 melons to his chest, and was wearing a hairnet. "Help! Help!" he cried. "They're hot on my tail!" He stopped and leant on my shoulder, panting. "And let me tell you, that's not as good as it sounds." Looking back, my first words to the fleeing man seemed to be an index of just how alienated I'd got by this point. "Tell me," I said to him, "do you think I'm a boy or a girl?" He looked at me with pursed lips. "Well, it's so hard to tell these days. But listen." And that was when things got so much better for me. Because at that point, out of the forest ran a group of fearsome Grell servitors. Of course, they had black doublet and hose on, and carried normal axes instead of their usual date axes. But I'd know those squiddy faces anywhere. A Grell is a Grell is a Grell, even when he's got tights on. I actually laughed, which made the Grell step back a bit. Goodness, I must have been more than a little dishevelled at that point. "The Grell!" I exclaimed, pointing at them as if they were school friends that I'd met by accident at a dinner party. "The Grell from planet Grellor. You don't think you're gnomes or elves or something, do you?" "We are the Grell," confirmed their leader. "New fact. You know of our true identity. Corollary. You have information concerning our situation. Therefore, you will come with us and tell us all you know." My glee hardly faded. This was so exciting. It was almost like being alive again. "I think not," I mocked, placing one foot atop a nearby barrel and glancing at my fingernails as I afforded the aliens and Professor Candy the best possible opportunity to gaze at my chubby thighs. Not that either of them, even in the normal run of things, would have noticed. "Do you imagine that this building behind us is a mere cottage?" The Grell looked at each other and conferred for a moment. Then their leader spoke again. "Yes," he said, "we do." Candy looked between the aliens and my now not-so-cocksure expression, and made the tactical decision for us. "Scarpa!" he cried. I leapt off the barrel and, together, we ran inside the cottage, slammed the door shut, and bolted it. There was a little bit of business with the both of us trying to get through the door at once and getting stuck, but that was so embarrassing that I won't go into it in detail. Diary entry ends. Bernice and Candy stumbled into the dwarves' kitchen, slammed the door behind them, bolted it, and leant on it. "Aliens!" Bernice laughed. "And they know they're aliens. All right, so they want to suck all the information out of my brain?" There was a thump on the door. "But at least they're from the same universe as me." The others looked at her, their mugs halfway to their mouths. Candy grabbed a nearby chest and shoved it against the door. "I'm Candy," she called over her shoulder, "and I don't know what she's talking about either. But there are some hideous demons out there who've chased me all the way through the woods. And that hasn't happened in a while, let me tell you." "Demons?" gasped Cute, wide-eyed. "Oh, sure," said Bitchy, "and stepmothers are nice people." A Grell appeared at the window and swung back its axe. The dwarves cried out in terror. Woolsey leapt up and slammed the wooden shutters closed, holding them there against a smash and a tinkling of glass, then fastening them with a bolt. "Get to the other windows," he snarled at the panicking dwarves. "Hurry!" "Okay," sighed Lazy. "If we must." We must defend Bernice," cried Gushy, pulling a short sword from her belt. "Right," agreed Moody, doing the same. Come on, dwarves, let's reach up high and kick some bottom. They ran from the room. Wolsey drew his own sabre and leapt to Bernice's side. Who did you say these demons were? He asked. Let's just say that I know them by reputation, Bernice said, giving him a smile and a quick little hug. It's wonderful to see somebody else from home. Wolsey looked at her suspiciously and then glanced at Candy. He indicated Bernice with a claw. Male or female? He asked. Candy stopped piling things against the door and waved her hands in the air distractedly, as if making a decision. Male, she finally settled on. Wolsey nodded, happier. It seems the world is not completely at odds with my opinion. There came a crash from the door, and Candy was sent flying backwards, her legs going straight up in the air, revealing a pair of bright red bloomers under her skirt. The Grell ran in through the remains of the door, slashing the air with their axes. Wolsey leapt forward, pushing Bernice back, and sent the first alien's axe flying with a sweep of his sword. Planting a foot in its chest, he sent it stumbling back into the other Grell, knocking them over. Bernice pulled Candy to her feet. There was a scream from upstairs. Come on, she yelled. She ran for the stairs, dragging a protesting Candy behind her. The Grell struggled to their feet, retrieved their weapons, and braced themselves to rush through the door again. Wolsey stood on the threshold, the tip of his sabre twirling before him. So, my squiddish friends, who's for calamari? Bernice and Candy rushed upstairs to find that a Grell had climbed the outside of the cottage, burst in through one of the windows, and was now standing on one of the beds, holding off a circle of the dwarves with blows from its axe. Fine facts, it affirmed, as it struck aside Ladish's sword. It doesn't know what it's doing here, and that's the most dangerous situation in which to meet a Grell. Intellectually, it's like a cornered rat, Bernice muttered to Candy, who was doing a fair impersonation of a cornered rat herself. She called to the alien on the bed. Grell, how did you come to be here? The alien hooted, fixing the circle of dwarves with its dark eyes. We do not know, it said. We boarded the ship. We sought facts. We were suddenly here. Bernice pushed through the dwarves and held aside Moody's sword for a moment in order to get close enough to the Grell to see into its eyes. Do you remember dying? She asked. I'm alive, therefore... You do, don't you? Bernice sighed. You're just too literal-minded to appreciate the fact. Tell me, this is important. Do the Grell have an afterlife? What's it supposed to be like? Information. The inner land of Slawcore is inside Grellor. There none are servitors, all are masters. All facts are knowable, nothing is hidden, and the secrets of the universe are available as perfect flowers on the walls. It fluttered its mouth tentacles angrily. There are no dwarves there. But what if you're evil? Where do bad Grell go? The Grell's tentacles bunched up, an expression Bernice knew of bemusement. There are no bad Grell. Fab, Bernice smiled to herself. So this isn't eternal torment. This is a puzzle, and puzzles are here to be solved. The Grell lunged forward. Bernice caught the haft of its axe in her hand and pulled, neatly depriving the beast of its weapon, which she weighed in her hands thoughtfully as she addressed it. When whoever your current master is has given it some thought, he'll realize that you, Grell, are as much out of your depth here as I am. No date axes, no comment. Couldn't we join forces? The Grell do not form partnerships with less knowledgeable races, the Grell gurgled. As you wish. All right, Gushy, grab him. The dwarves pounced on the Grell and, through weight of numbers, pinned him to the bed. Moody looked up at Bernice. We can hold him hostage and get the others to call off the siege. If we do that, we'll be here forever. The Grell don't like losing servitors. They see it as a possible information leak. No. She cautiously went to the window and swung the broken frame open with the axe, glancing to the left and right before looking out. The Grell had surrounded the cottage. With no projectile weapons, all they could do at the sight of her was hoot. She waved to them, before turning back to the dwarves. "This one's too little to bother with. Throw him back." The dwarves, all save Moody, started to manhandle the grell towards the window. Moody just looked at Bernice in amazement. "Why don't we kill him then? It'd be one less of the things." Bernice frowned, looking down at her boots for a moment. "I'm a professor of archaeology, not a soldier. I don't kill people." "Since when are you giving the orders?" She looked up at him again, biting her bottom lip giddily. "Do you want your 2-1 or not? Now." She swung back to the other dwarves before he could argue. "A grell carapace can quite easily handle a fall from this height. You monster, will tell your master that we should work together, right?" The grell opened its mouth orifice into a little circle, the grell version of a nod, as its eyes fixed on Gushy's blade at its throat. "Fine," said Bernice. "Let him go." The dwarves rushed the grell to the window and threw him out. He landed amongst his peers to great hooting. From downstairs there came a crash. "Fix that window," Bernice told the dwarves, meeting Moody's eyeline for a moment. "I must just see what my cat's getting up to." Woolsey, as Bernice got to the bottom of the stairs, was actually doing a cartwheel down the dinner table, at the end of which he leapt off and kicked a grell in the chest, sending him flying backwards. Half of the many grell in the room turned to look at Bernice, and she suddenly realized that she was unarmed and almost completely unprepared for this. 2 of them rushed at her. She grabbed a frying pan that had been hanging on the kitchen wall and pointed it at them like a gun. "Stop!" she roared, "or be atomized." The grell stopped, unsure, as Bernice had bet on, of anything in their environment at that moment. "But that's just a frying pan," murmured Woolsey. The grell looked at him, then back at Bernice, who glowered at her cat. "Sorry," Woolsey slapped his own forehead. "I see what you were trying to do now." The grell leapt at Benny again. She swiped the first one aside with the frying pan. The other one slashed at her with its axe, gashing her across the arm. The cut swelled with blood. She dropped the frying pan. "I can be hurt!" she cried in excitement. Then her face froze. "Bugger! I can be hurt!" The grell raised its axe over its head to deliver the knockout blow, but Woolsey leapt at it and chopped the haft of its axe in 2 with one singing swish of his sword. He shoved the unarmed grell away into a corner, where it gathered with its fellows for a final rush that would at least drive Bernice and Woolsey back up the stairs, if not overwhelm them altogether. "Hold on to me, Dick," muttered Woolsey through clenched teeth. "I beg your pardon," said Bernice. They braced themselves for the onslaught. And then, from outside the cottage, a trumpet sounded. The grell master poked his head through the doorway of the cottage and shouted to his troops. "New fact. A large body of troops is approaching. Leave this place and hide." Hooting in urgency and casting dark, squiddy glances over their shoulders at Bernice and Woolsey, the grell gathered up their weapons and injured comrades and ran for the door. Slowly the dwarves and Candy trooped down the stairs behind the 2 friends. "They stopped trying to get in upstairs," Moody reported. "They're running off into the forest." They all sat down on the steps, gazing at the wreckage of the kitchen. "At least the place doesn't look so neat anymore," said Laddish. "Good cat," said Bernice, hugging Woolsey's arm. From outside the trumpet sounded again, this time much closer. "Come on, let's see who's come to our rescue." Outside the cottage stood a small army. Bernice and the others staggered out of the door and stared at it in the morning sunlight, the massed armour of the mounted soldiers reflecting silver and gold. At the head of the column of knights, with their banners and lances, sat a young square-jawed man with squarely cut, bright blonde hair. On top of the hair sat a crown. He stared at Bernice as she stepped into the sunlight, his mouth open in amazement. "Why," he breathed, "she's not on top form at the moment, actually. We would invite you in," Bernice gestured to the cottage, "but the place is such a mess." Bernice was trying to pay attention to the young man. For one thing, he looked very familiar, as were a number of his fellow knights, and she was having trouble placing them. But something else was demanding her attention, namely that from the column of elegantly groomed and muscular horses, a very different animal, without rider or braid, had detached itself, and had wandered up to her, looking at her expectantly. This horse was small, grey, and shabby-looking, totally unlike all the others. It seemed to be trying to communicate something to her in its stare. Bernice was about to at least find it a sugar lump when the man at the front of the column finished his sentence. "Beautiful!" and leapt off his horse. He walked straight over to Bernice and hoisted her up into his arms, which was rather fortunate, as that was the exact moment that Bernice's adrenaline levels dipped and her body informed her that, actually, she was weak from loss of blood. She slumped into his grasp. "Why, you're wounded," he gasped. "Those fiends. I shall hunt them down across the kingdom. I shall not rest until—" "Brandy," Bernice hissed as the world started to twist into awful shapes over her head. "And do put some on the wound as well. Thank you." And she fell unconscious. The man looked at Wolsey and the dwarves. "You are all her friends?" "His friends, yes," Wolsey muttered, wondering why today had turned out to be so confusing. "Yes, we certainly are," chimed in Candy more loudly. "And you, if I may say so, look to be a very well-appointed young man." "Then you must all come with me," said the armoured man. "I am Prince Charming, son of King Rupert. We were out riding when we saw your cottage under attack from those demons, and had to intervene. I am taking this unfortunate and beautiful lady to a place where she may receive the best medical attention. We ride to my father's castle." With a great trumpeting, the column moved off, separating to allow Wolsey, Candy, and the dwarves, once Gushy had locked the door of the cottage, to march in the middle. The prince walked at the front, carrying the sleeping Bernice, a concerned expression on his face. Wolsey looked at the strange horse, which had drawn level with him, and was keeping pace, an odd, questioning expression on its face. "I don't know about you," said the cat, "but I think that something rather odd is going on around here." The horse nodded.